Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Perry from Books Aren't Boring, and I'm coming at you from a new location because the original location that I normally film is too loud to film in right now, so here we are. Today we're going to be discussing Raisin in the Sun. Yay. So this is technically not a book, kind of like Othello, how I went over Othello, but it is a play. And it's written in more of a book form than like Shakespearean books typically are. So there's a lot of description. There's an entire section at the beginning where it just looks like walls of text, but it's still descriptive. It's descriptive wording. So Raisin in the Sun is about this family, a family of black people who live in a very small house apartment, and they're always having trouble with money. Their grandmother is known as Mama, and her husband, I think, passed away, and they are going to get, the main point of most of the first part is that they're going to receive a check with money in it. And Walter, the husband, wants to use the money to start up a liquor store with his friends. His wife, Ruth, does not want to do that because she thinks that's a waste of money, which it turns out it will be because his friends betray him. Now, Walter has a sister named Beneatha, and she is the rebel of the family. She's the one who wants to go off to college, who wants to become a doctor. She just really wants to learn and engage herself in the outside world, and her family kind of looks down upon her for that because she's spending her money on trivial things, I think a guitar and horses and different random activities that she thinks will be interesting for the time being, but then she doesn't pursue them. Then there's Travis. He's the son of the family. He's a little kid, and he isn't really important, and they're just kind of he's a character because he's their child and all that. One of the main conflicts of the story is money, of course. When we had to do essays about this in class, I would always write about money because the main conflict was about Beneatha spending the money or Walter becoming a liquor store entrepreneur, or the fact that they were receiving the check in the mail for I think it was around $10,000. That was the $10,000 check. But a lot of the other themes also involve dreams and aspirations and going back to your roots, which is a lot of what Beneatha actually does, which is there's not really a main character, but Beneatha is the main character in that it follows basically her journey. She has a friend named Joseph Asagai. Not sure if that's correct pronunciation, but I'll put the spelling up on the screen so you can just see how it's spelled, and then you can know the pronunciation or just go off of whatever. And then her friend George Murchison, they have a weird relationship where they're not really dating, but they're also not just friends, if that makes sense. Joseph is the one who helps Beneatha kind of return to her roots, or at least he gives her traditional clothing, and it makes her want to embrace her past more, so she takes out her natural hair at one point, and everyone's really confused and is why are you doing that? It looks so weird. And she's I'm just connecting myself with the past, which is kind of revolutionary for the family at the time because they've been trying to kind of reject their past and move on to the world where they kind of entrench themselves in stereotypes, but nevertheless they're just trying to get by. And of course we have the problem of they want to move houses, but their only chance of moving is into next to or in an all-white neighborhood, which wasn't a great idea at the time because if a black family moved into a white neighborhood, the white families would all try to get rid of that one family, and they would end up moving out. But they were going to try to stand their ground, even though the landlord, the landlord Carl Lindner was trying to force them to not move or force them into some weird arrangement. And by the end they do move out, and it's great, fantastic, amazing. They move past it type of thing. Now, after that brief summary, we're going to move into why the book isn't boring. Well, it's not really a book. Why the play isn't boring, because sometimes it can be really boring to read plays when you haven't got a visual representation of them right in front of you. I don't know if there's a film version, a filmed version of this play, because it seems to be very famous, but we never looked at anything that was live action. We only read the play. And maybe they did look at something that was live action, but then again, I was not in school for the last part of reading this, so I'm not actually sure. But if there is, that's kind of cool, and if you find it on YouTube, perhaps you could link it below so that I could see it, because I want to see this. It would be really awesome to see The Raisin in the Sun in live action, because it's very good. Well, first of all, the book isn't boring because it was basically revolutionary for the time. If you think about it in that aspect, it's kind of like, wow, I should be reading this because it's really cool. So it was the first time that like African American Black history had really been represented in a theater setting. So of course that's important, and also like it wasn't romanticized or overly looked down upon in any way. It was kind of like a gray area as opposed to like many of the other things that I assume were out at the time. The concept of dreams constantly being pushed down upon is also very important and interesting to look at, because in a lot of other plays, the dreams of characters are typically like the end goal, like that's what you're gonna see them achieve. But in this book, you never really see anyone's dreams being achieved. The only dream, I guess, would be that they got to move out and move to a better house. But in general, like, we didn't see Benita become a doctor. We didn't see Walter get his liquor store. We didn't get to see that happen, and it's so different from all the other like adventurous, cool stories that actually let us see the characters succeed. But in this reality, they aren't necessarily able to succeed, and that's the like sad, dramatic part about it. The conflicts over money are also very interesting because money starts out as a very important plot point, but then it kind of declines as the story goes on. It's not necessarily unimportant, it just, once the check comes after the liquor store thing, everything is it's kind of set on the back burner, if that makes sense. So, but at the beginning, we see that like Ruth doesn't want Travis, her son, to get quarters to bring to school, but then her husband Walter is like, let the kid have it, even though they're running low on money constantly. So it wasn't really the best idea to give Travis that money, but it's interesting to see how different members of the family handle the economic hardships that they go through, and how like Benita cares, but she also wants to go her own way, so she doesn't feel as connected to the money in her family as the rest of them do. Speaking of hardships, we also have characters that come in and just completely throw off the argument of different characters. For example, Mrs. Johnson is a character that, according to like an asterisk in the book, it says that she was cut out from the first couple iterations of the play, but now she's in this version. And she's kind of just like the old talking lady stereotype, where she just goes on and says slightly insensitive things that she doesn't catch herself, or she does and she's doing it purposefully, but either way, it's just really cringy to watch from afar. That's Mrs. Johnson's character. She goes on and she's like, have you heard of all the black families that have been bombed out of white neighborhoods? You should be so worried. I am worried. And then she starts talking about like the professions of the family, which obviously isn't very sensitive, considering that, you know, they don't exactly love their professions, and also Mrs. Johnson isn't really close to them, as it is obvious by all of the crisply asterisks around Ruth's words during this period of time. Just to give you an example, this is one of the quotes that Benita says after the Mrs. Johnson incident, and it's, "Mama, if there are two things we as a people have got to overcome, one is the Ku Klux Klan and the other is Mrs. Johnson." AKA Mrs. Johnson is nosy and annoying. Just for reference. She's not an antagonist. She's just really annoying. The landlord, Carl Lidner, is the antagonist, because he's the one who's trying to convince them not to go because he thinks that they'll be better off in their own communities, type of thing. Segregation. Plus, it's not boring because it keeps you kind of on your toes throughout the entire thing. You want to know what comes next. You want to know how the family is going to fare in their next obstacle, type of thing. You want to see how they're going to handle this situation, how the characters are going to be able to like find themselves more in this one instance. Because of course there's different acts, but the ends of the acts don't necessarily end the play. They don't leave them on cliffhangers, but they kind of do in some circumstances. Like when we used to stop reading in class, I would be like, oh my gosh, I need to know what happens next, but I also then didn't read it because I didn't want to spoil myself, because that would be annoying having to read through it all over again. I have to say though that it is better to read these types of things out loud than just read them like head in book constantly because it's kind of annoying to try to keep track of everything, keep track of all the different voices, characters, what's going on. It's easier when you are able to read it out loud. Of course, not everyone is going to have that luxury, but if you're able to find a reading of it online, it would be way easier to keep track of it. Usually they're on YouTube somewhere. You might have to dig a little bit, but I'm sure they're there. Of course, the rejection of Beneatha's family towards, like, her heritage is kind of weird to listen to, but it's just part of the cultural aspect that the author Lorraine Hansberry was really trying to bring into the play itself. If you haven't heard of it, I hope you'll give it a chance, and if you do need to read it for class or for some other project, good luck. I hope you like it because I did, and thank you for watching. For more videos like these on other books, please consider subscribing or at least checking out my channel. Maybe comment something that you enjoyed or any other suggestions, because I know that not every school's curriculum is the same, and there may be books that you've read or have to read that I haven't, and I love to check them out. So thank you for watching again. Bye.